2020 was the year social justice came to Norway. Identity politics replaces education at the National Academy of Arts in Oslo, Norway. 5 students have written this article I will be quoting from, and saying that they demand to get an education instead of just ideology, politics, and indoctrination. Now, what is at stake here is an attempt to deliver the final death blow to any idea of objective knowledge or quality. It is an attempt to make what you are creating utterly irrelevant, because the important thing now is moral purity. In short, they are implementing critical theory. And let me just say that you should really read Cynical Theories by James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose if you really want to go into it. That will explain it all. I will now deal with how this affects the culture field. Before we get into what these 5 students are writing, though, head over to kvoapelles.com/donate, and there are different ways you can support our show, and you can check out the benefit you get from doing so. So what these 5 students are writing about is this photograph here by Vanessa Beecroft, is the artist behind it at any rate. So what we're seeing here is one black woman and then a dozen or whatever white women, not only in blackface but in black bodies as well. And it's actually hanging at the National Academy of Arts. And it's quite interesting because this is from art in public space. There's a state institution for everything in Norway. And they're saying that the photography forces a reaction and invites to political and ethical discussions. Well, that is what is going on now, because the 12 students at the academy started this imported the idea of social justice here now to the National Academy of Arts, saying that that photograph is racist. Obviously, it was made as a critique of racism. So what we're witnessing right now is the revolution eating its own children. So let's dig into it. This is the former principal of the academy, who very much supported the demands from these 12 students, and also later from a group of 136 students and employees. So I will be reading from this article written by 5 students who object. 5 students at the National Academy of Art who object to what is going on, and they are referring to this letter by this signed by this 136 people, saying that that the letter starts with problematizing whiteness in state and institutional structures, specifically related to the art field. And that this letter then is saying that whiteness is a position anyone can find themselves in, independent of their skin color. And despite of whiteness trying to help, it only tries to keep its power over others. So this is the moral purification, because of course no one wants to, or no one is supporting racism. What they're doing now is making a coup, saying we are the only ones who are fighting against racism. So if you do not agree with us, then you are a bigoted person. This is what I refer to as art 2.0, because you can say that with art, what you create, the actual object, has been unimportant for a very, very long time. Now it is becoming even less important, because it's all about not even the idea behind, but about your moral purity. And so getting to what they are talking about here, then these 136 students, and it's all seems very fair. They are saying that the actions that have gone on in America, this protests against police violence, against racism, taking down colonial or racist monuments, that is something that they should be doing at the Art Academy in Oslo as well. And they're saying that they know that what has happened in America has been re-traumatizing for racified students. Not shitting you, racified students. And that the Art Academy has done nothing about this, and this reveals the lack of understanding and support that BIPOC students encounter at the school, or that their experiences at the school. So these 5 students go on to describe what this letter is saying, that and these 136 students and employees want obligatory BIPOC representation in all democratic processes, yada yada, and they want to document racism, homophobia, transphobia, and discrimination against people with disabilities. Now, this is where it gets scary. Documentation. And also, when if you read Lindsay, if you go to newdiscourses.com and you go into that material, you understand that this is, from the critical theory point of view, you posit that there is a problem like racism. You just have to find examples of it, and it's hidden in language, and it's hidden in mysterious ways that you cannot see, so you can never know that you are not bigoted. So what counts as racism, homophobia, transphobia, and discrimination in general is limitless. And so these 136 students also want they want obligatory anti-racist training, and they are openly attacking white professors and their lack of knowledge, because the lack of non-Eurocentric viewpoints and experiences are endangering the artistic work of BIPOC students. Okay, so this is the standpoint theory thing. Again, Lindsay describes that very well, where if you are not in a sort of victim situation, then you do not know what reality is really like. Well, the only thing I can say to that, it's time for a little reality check, because when it comes to what they're saying here now, that there's a lack of non-Eurocentric viewpoints. This was made in Nigeria about 600 years ago, the Ife culture. So what do you call that? Do you call that an amazing, beautiful sculpture, or is it internalized racism? This is, I believe, 9th century Japanese. You have the contrapposto. This is totally Greek, but I guess that's wrong, because it might have been influenced by the Greeks. So that's maybe internalized bigotry in any case. You have Li Cheng, Chinese painter of the 10th century, making work that really is more or less identical to what Lars Hartvig in Norway is doing in the end of the 19th century. And you have stuff like this. This is 12th century Chinese Bodhisattva, and you have, of course, Egyptian stuff like this. Now this is a sensual body. Shout out to Citizen Art for this blog. So when they're saying that there's a lack of non-Eurocentric viewpoints, well, then history kind of makes that statement fairly meaningless. So and they're also writing here that these 5 students, that when when there's this push to fight against structural racism and sexism in the name of social justice, in the name of critical race theory, decolonization studies, etc., there has been no examples of this. And other than that, this artist Beecroft's photograph is problematic. And I think if we go to here's the thing. So the students then, this 136 students are not protesting that against men being underrepresented and BIPOC overrepresented at the National Academy. So is this not problematic? And the intentions are not. You cannot misunderstand the intention. These 5 students are saying, quoting on, "The white gaze gets to define what is seen as relevant and of quality." And that what is being taught at the Art Academy ignores whole continents, peoples, and cultures, and that the Art Academy then has to commit to decolonization of what is being taught, etc., etc. And as we just saw, this just shows that they are completely ignorant when it comes to the actual history. And I think also the former director here says that we have to look at what we can do to support Black Lives Matter, anti-racism, and the decolonization of art. Now, okay, there's a couple of points here. I mean, this is an implementation of what is going on generally in society within the field of culture, within the field of art specifically. So I think if you saw that folder from the North American Museum of African American History and Culture, which problematized whiteness, white culture, and saying that this is something that believes in being objective, in being rational, which values individualism, rugged individualism, and where you're not supposed to show emotion, for example. There's a bunch of other things on the list, of course, but I'm cherry picking here specifically to show, to make the point that, first of all, if you want to decolonialize art, you have to understand that art was the value system of fine art was coined by white, Eurocentric, and in some cases racist men in the late 18th, early 19th century. And what the whole fundament of this concept of fine art is first and foremost anti-reason. Immanuel Kant writes in the Critique of Judgment from 1790 that it is first when you do not know what you're doing that you are creating art. And so fine art then is also anti-objectivity, because craft is unimportant. That's not something you should engage in. And the genius that Kant is talking about should have nothing to do with that whatsoever. In fact, he should just find these things in himself. So there's a subjectivity there, which is the exact opposite of the objectivity that is said to be quote-unquote white, which is also blatantly racist, by the way. And this is why Edvard Munch could say that, to me, the sky is green, right? So second of all, individuality. If there is one thing that signifies the concept of fine art defined by white men, it is that it is anti-individual. The genius that Kant is talking about has to free himself from the past, free himself from knowledge, which makes you a slave to the theoreticians and that is not exactly individualism, is it? You have Hegel, the other great white philosopher, talking about this, who talks about the zeitgeist. You have to be in your time. Now, what is this? This is to belong to the group. And if you look at what has been made inspired by these two philosophers, you see that individuality and showing emotions is not exactly what we're talking about here. Quite the contrary. If you look at this thing by Matisse, you see that the stereotypical depiction of man is what signifies the concept of art. So if you want to decolonialize art, well, then you should go back to the Greco-Roman way of thinking. But they don't get that, do they? So this is why this is happening then at the Art Academy. And I have to say that you know, they are saying then that there are students at the Art Academy not because they want obligatory indoctrination, but because they want to learn, you know, a craft basically. So there's still people like that, and they're saying here then that, and this is the really scary part. This has come to Norway as well. Silent is consent of racism. And they're saying then that there's also been mention of open debate, of course, but none of that has happened so far. And they're saying then that because of this idea of social justice, you have intersectionality, and again, go to newdiscourses.com to learn more about that. Where you are judged not by the content of your character, but the color of your skin or whatever sexuality or group that you belong to. So what happens is, and this is what these 5 students are writing, is that if you deviate from this social justice idea that is being implemented, you cannot do that. Even if you are of some kind of, if you are BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, or person of color, if you hold a position which goes against what they're trying to implement, then you are some kind of traitor. And I really have to show you this, because this is the letter written by those 136 students being read aloud collectively at the National Academy of Arts. So if you want to hear what open debate sounds like,
the recruitment process of staff members has been discussed with the particular and the director.
So, yeah. I'll take a closed debate at any time if this is open debate. And this is one of the students who wrote the article that I have been reading from. And the funny thing is that he has been mocking the situation going on because it's a matter of ideology and not of exchanging ideas. And he has been really attacked for that. And it just completely illustrates the point, because this man, Vebjørn Pedersen, is Sami. So he is an indigenous person, a Norwegian person, but an indigenous person. And when he is going against what they're trying to implement, that does not help at all. Now, and this is when we're getting back to what this really is about. It's not about social justice with a lowercase s and j. This is about a cultural as Antonio Gramsci, the Italian communist, to say, this is about getting the cultural hegemony. It's a cultural revolution, and what they are doing is trying to destroy the very fundament of what a culture is, which is to have certain objective criteria, objective ideas of what quality is. If you do not have that, you as an individual have absolutely no safety net at all. What you're left with is nepotism and camaraderie. And as I say, what the end result here is that what you create is utterly unimportant, because everything is just seen through this hierarchy of victimhood. And when they are trying to purify the moral completely, then in the end no one will do. And of course, anyone who works within some kind of creative activity should be concerned about this, because we are talking about language policing, and that means thought policing, which means policing of what you are creating. Because in what lies implicit in this is that anything that has to do with the old regime is oppressive, because that's how they think, either oppressor or the oppressed. So if you belong to something that was before, you are the oppressor. So painting a classical figurative portrait becomes an act of oppression, and therefore an act of aggression. So anyone who works with especially classical culture in some way, when it comes to theater or when it comes to poetry, sculpture, whatever, is especially in the hotspot here. And one of the ways they are doing this is by blurring the boundaries. So they are doing this through blurring what you create and who you are morally, merging that, so that if you are a morally good person by the standards, accepted standards, then what you create is good. If you are morally not acceptable, then what you create is bad. We've heard this before in history. And what is at stake here is the idea of individuality, but also of universality, because the whole idea of the Ife sculptures here, there's things made by the Assyrians in ancient Egypt, as we've seen, the Greeks obviously in the Baroque times. The whole point there is the idea of ecce homo, look at this human being. And so that's a fight against individuality in that sense. They want to get completely rid of that. And there's also the fight against individuality in the sense that because you are judged by your political correctness and not by what you create, you as an individual are given an increasingly worse situation when it comes to trying to establish yourself within the culture field somehow. Now, I think one of the most important things too is that what we're losing, if this wins, is the archetypical perspective. And if there's one thing we need as human beings, it is to see our life in the eternal perspective and not just in terms of contemporary politics. And that's what they want to do with the implementation of critical theory of social justice, all of these buzzwords, is to trick you into getting a tunnel vision only on what is happening right here and now. And that is a recipe for mental illnesses outright. What is happening here is that we're talking about the temptation of Buddha. You can have power in your time, but then they take your soul seriously. You are being tricked into, if you follow this, being tricked into focusing only on what is going on in your time, forgetting the internal perspective. And if you are creating something that has to do with the classical form, it is vital that you are aware of this. And that's why also you need to read Joseph Campbell, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, who is talking about how the hero is always the person who brings eternity into the present.